Okay, let's start talking about moving on to the final. Sake of argument, I've got a bunch of thumbnails. I got all my reference material, which I don't actually have in here. I think I've got some reference that I've dropped in here. Um, so I've dropped that in. I've done a bunch of thumbnails, and I've come down to a single one that I actually want to work with. It's probably a small drawing. It's probably super rough, and we're going to move on to the concept. So I want to redraw this because this was just a starting point. It was a doodle. It was an idea, and I want to rethink and reshape a little bit. Push and pull it in a better direction. It got me going, but it isn't the final. Um, that's why we're doing them fast and everything else, right? So we want to do them a little cleaner. Now, make note, if you look at the reference material of what was done last year, this is still a relatively rough drawing, but we're going to take it through color. We're going to take it through some lighting and everything else. And we're going to try and draw it a little more cleaner. We're going to try and add some of those details. In my design here, I've gone and added a couple of things in, like one of the bars has been pushed out, for instance. Um, you know, Obviously I need to do a better job on that. It needs to be cleaned up and everything else. The top got ripped open somehow. I'm gonna maybe have a board sticking out there a bit more or something. I don't know. I could think through a couple of things just as to how I'm going to deal with that at this point. Um, and not worry about the drawing. I can just sketch over it. Probably something on the side, like it's a shipping thing, right? This side up or whatever. And obviously, whatever in this case, animals escape, the typical sort of idea of footprints. And something to note that nobody seems to do is, they'll have a broken piece, but where are all the pieces from the broken piece? So I've drawn those on the ground here. So this is all on one layer pretty much. It's a scribble. It's fast. Now we need to start thinking in layers and start building stuff up in layers, or else we're going to cause ourselves a lot of pain and grief if we don't. So in my concept folder here, I tend to find it best to start with folders right away. And so I'm going to make this one called sketch. And this is where I'm going to put my lines. Um, now the go away. So I'm going to move this out of the way, V on the keyboard, make sure I click on it because I've got the auto select on. I'm just going to stuff it up into the corner for now as reference. So at least I've got it kind of there and it's out of my way. Back to my sketch folder that I created. And I'm going to create a layer in there and I'll start working on layers inside of here. B on the keyboard to go back to my brush, make sure that I am using a hard brush, completely hard round brush in this case. Okay. And again, a couple practice lines, just kind of see what my pressure's like. Am I getting the kind of sensitivity I'm looking for? Maybe a little bit bigger brush, depending on, I got pretty good control over that. It feels pretty good. Um, Now, what people start doing is they draw their box again, this tiny little thing down here or whatever, and we got this entire canvas. We're going to make a piece of, we're going to make a piece of imagery here. So we need to get our drawing big. You don't want to draw small and scale it up. You want to try and avoid that as much as possible because it'll make it pixelated and everything. So we kind of want to draw fairly large. Sometimes it's a little bit easier if you and my touch zoom doesn't seem to be working for some strange reason. Trying to zoom it out. Sometimes it's easier to do longer lines by zooming out because you don't have to draw as far depending on the size of your tablet and everything else. I've got a 22-inch Cintiq in front of me that I'm drawing on. So, I can push it out. You're doing small stuff, zoom in, right? So I'm going to try from here and I'm going to start drawing something like this, maybe change the angle a little bit, rotate it towards me and whatnot. I believe Megan has talked about uh, vanishing points and worked with the vanishing points with you, and we can work within that ourselves instead of just trying to draw it. Now I don't know how she's shown you to draw it, but you want to get it mostly right. One of the things you'll hear me say is it's got to be mostly correct. We're doing a piece of concept art here. It doesn't need to be fine art. It isn't perfect. It's got to be mostly right, and I want you to draw it. I don't want you to use the line tools or anything. So here's one of the ways I use in Photoshop to get my lines right. If you look at this drawing, I'll just put that in there. The horizon line is about the middle here. It's going down the center of this, and that's kind of where the horizon is. So if I were to do a drawing like that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go lay down some reference lines to start with. So I'm going to pull out from my um, ruler up top here, and if it's not on Control R, or I think it's under View, probably Rulers, there it is, Control R will open it up, and go back to the V tool for selecting, and you can move them around. You want to get rid of one, just scrub it off the top. So I want to pull my horizon line out like this. And then we need, and I'm going to zoom off further because we don't want it too close, because our horizon points are going to be way away from the edges. And so I'm going to move them out here. And so that's going to be a horizon line or a point, and that's going to be one. We're going to do a 2-point perspective basically on our box here. So this is going to create, you know, a line somewhere in the center for the edge of the box. I'll pull one of those out, for instance. And then I can start thinking about laying down some lines. So where's the top corner of the box going to be? Well, I'm going to drop one where the top corner of the box is. And I'm going to drop one where the bottom corner of the box is going to be. And I'm just going to draw it big. I could scale it down, but I think I'll go with this sort of thing here. So our horizon points are going to go from this point here, where this crossing happens, down to this corner. So here's the trick. I'm going to go back to my brush, and let's call this layer perspective. For now, we're going to put perspective lines in here. I've got my brush, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to get away from the tapered brush, and I'm going to go to a completely solid brush. So it doesn't taper at all, it doesn't give me any tapering lines. I'm also going to make the brush small, so it's nice and small. And here's one way to do it. So I'm going to just put a dot here, hold down Shift, and stick another dot. Put a dot, just tap, lift, hold down Shift, tap, 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 so that I can draw those perspective lines in and start putting those lines in. I'm going to do one down the middle just to get started. It's going to be there. Somewhere about here is going to be the side of my box. So I'm going to tap, Shift, tap, and it'll give me a line. It's crooked. Well, then let's drop in another line so that we kind of get that mostly right. And I'll give myself one this way, mostly right. Probably there-ish. And that's starting to give us some lines. Now, I want more of these perspective lines so that I've got a sort of a grid of them to use as reference. I might be drawing in between them, and I'm not using them specifically. So I'm going to go and do from my vanishing point, tap, to the midpoint between these two, tap, down to my vanishing point, tap, back to the midpoint again, tap, back to my vanishing point, tap, start again, tap, midpoint, midpoint, and start again. So that's starting to get me some vanishing lines. Now I'm even going to just give myself a center line here, because that'll give me another one to work with. On the sticky keys thing, drives me nuts. Go and disable it and completely turn it off. If you click and hold too long in Windows, it'll think that you might be looking for the disability options that allow you to be able to sort of click and hold down a Shift key for a long period of time, and it'll stick and then go and use the mouse with the same hand. Unless you need that, of course. So this should work pretty good. You know, we could give ourselves some grid marks up and down if we want. You can also just draw them. If you hold down Shift, it'll give you a line, a straight line. And you can throw yourself some grid lines in this way as well if you want. You have to start drawing and then hold it. So and you can see a stupid thing coming up again. So to hide off all of these guides that you've got now, you can go Control H and it'll hide them all off. And at least it's giving you this grid box to start working with. At least it'll get your lines closer to being correct. So the next step I do is I take this perspective and I go up to where it says opacity here, and I just crank the opacity down on it nice and low. You can just click on the word or open the dialog. It's up to you. But I just pull it so it's a faint little thing, you know, and I can barely see it. It's just, you know, sort of there for me to work with. Now I don't touch that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lock that layer. I'm trying to think where the lock is. There it is. So I'm going to lock that layer so I don't accidentally draw on it. Make a new layer below it so that I can work on this layer and draw. And I always have this grid laid on top, and I can just hide and unhide the grid as I might need it. So back to our pen, I'm going to go start with black again. I'm going to go back to our brushes and go and find my hard, pressure size brush, right? And again, I'm going to have to make sure that my size is good, and that looks pretty good. At least now I've got something that I can use as a reference to start drawing a little bit cleaner lines. Again, we're not looking at doing this. If you drew a line nice and slow like that, one, you don't get any tapers, and two, it's all wonky. So I'd rather you do that. I'd rather have some little wonk to it and just sort of draw them in there. Now, I'm trying to draw without rotating this canvas. It's much easier if you rotate your canvas with the R key. And again, the R shift to snap it back straight again, you know. So get used to using that. Or again, if you've got some decent pressure control or touch control, then use it as well. So you can see I can lay down the box, and now my perspective is mostly correct, and I've got these reference lines. It's going to get me a mostly correct drawing as I start to lay it down and think about where everything's going to be in all the parts. So that's going to get you the starting point. Now let's take a look at moving forward this and drawing this box in the next video.